What's going on everybody, Kalipis Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Samsung Galaxy A34 5G and the BLU F91 5G. Now as always, if you do end up wanting to learn more about either phone individually, be sure to check out the description where I am linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the Samsung Galaxy A34 5G, we're getting a 6.6-inch 120Hz Super AMOLED display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 390, and a 19.5:9 aspect ratio. With the BLU F91 5G, we're getting a really large 6.8-inch LCD display. This phone also has a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 396, and a 20.5:9 aspect ratio. So overall, for what they are, both phones do have really good displays, but each one does have a slight advantage over the other. On one hand, with the A34 5G, the Super AMOLED does give it a pretty big advantage. With a display like this, the colors and brightness are going to be quite a bit better, and the viewing angles are also better. So if you're outside in the sun, for example, or really in any kind of bright area, the A34 5G is going to be quite a bit easier to see. So if you're in a situation where maybe you're spending a lot of time outside, this is definitely something to keep in mind. And with the 120Hz refresh rate, the movement on the screen with the A34 5G is going to be a bit faster and smoother, making the phone feel quite a bit more premium. So in general, while the BLU F91 5G does have pretty good image quality too, it still does have a 1080p resolution, so the image is nice and sharp. The A34 5G is going to look and feel quite a bit more premium, and if you're doing stuff like watching videos, for example, and really consuming a lot of content where the image quality is a bit more important, this will make a difference. On the other hand though, the BLU F91 5G, as you can clearly see, is quite a bit larger at 6.8 inches versus 6.6, and while the A34 5G is not small per se, in fact I want to say it's a bit above average, the BLU F91 5G is still quite a bit larger. So if you're doing stuff like reading, for example, where maybe you don't really need the best image quality, which again, it is still at least good, but if you do typically prefer a larger display and the image quality is maybe the second priority, then in that case, the BLU F91 5G will have an advantage. But either way, I feel like you're really not going to go wrong with either one here, because again, both phones do have really good displays. Now for storage, both phones are getting 128GB of internal storage, and they both also have microSD card expansion, so definitely great to see. Even at this point in 2023, 128GB is a pretty good amount of space, so no matter what you're doing, most people will be fine here. And then of course, if you have a bunch of photos and videos, for example, and you really want to expand your space, with either phone of course you can use a microSD card too, so definitely nice. Then for security features, both phones do have face unlock, and they both have fingerprint scanners too. With the A34 5G, it's right here in the display, so definitely nice and premium. And with the BLU F91 5G, it's on the power key. So both fingerprint scanners are in real good spots. But starting with the A34 5G, let's try them out. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And now for the BLU F91 5G. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, both fingerprint scanners were real fast and responsive, no issues at all. And again, both phones have face unlock too, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, with the Samsung Galaxy A34 5G, up front, we got a 13MP selfie camera, kind of a water drop notch here. Definitely not bad, but I feel like hole punch designs look a lot better. Again, this camera is 13MP. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup, with a 48MP main camera, an 8MP ultra wide camera, and a 5MP macro camera. And then for video, the A34 5G can record 4K videos on both the rear and front cameras, so definitely nice to see. With the BLU F91 5G, we got a nice looking hole punch design for the selfie camera. This camera is 16MP, so yeah, I feel like the selfie camera on the BLU F91 5G looks a bit better. Then on the back, we got a quad camera setup, with a 48MP main camera, a 5MP ultra wide camera, a 2MP depth sensing camera, and a 2MP macro camera. For video, this phone can record in 2K in the rear camera, and then 1080p in the front. So both phones do have really good cameras, they both have pretty much the same features. On one hand, the F91 5G does have a depth sensing camera, whereas the A34 5G doesn't, but it doesn't really make a huge difference. Portrait mode still works perfectly fine on this phone, so that part can kind of be ignored. Aside from that, again, they both have ultra-wide cameras and macro cameras, so definitely a good variety of features here. That being said though, when it comes to photo quality and video quality too, the A34 5G is quite a bit better. On one hand, the BLU F91 5G does take really good photos, and I feel like for the average user, you're probably not going to need a better camera than this. For stuff like Instagram, for example, the photo quality is plenty good enough. And then for stuff like Snapchat, sending photos to friends and family, things like that, you don't really need an amazing camera for that kind of thing anyway. So in general, you're probably not going to need a whole lot more than the BLU F91 5G to begin with. But if you are really using your camera all the time and you want to get the best photos you can between the two, the A34 5G is a bit better. I mean, this phone is a bit higher end, so it's to be expected. And again, this phone can record 4K videos, whereas with the BLU F91 5G, although it can at least record 2K in the rear, which is more than you can say for most phones in this general price range, you're not going to be doing 4K with this phone. So if you do want that ability, then you will want to go with the A34 5G. Now to give you an idea of what they can do, first, here's some pictures taken with the Samsung Galaxy A34 5G. So yeah, definitely great quality here, despite this being more of an affordable mid-range phone. The details and colors look surprisingly high quality, professional, and realistic, so if you're really taking a lot of pictures and you want something close to a higher end device kind of quality, but you still don't want to spend $500, $600, $700 or even $1,000 on a much higher end device, the A34 5G is going to be a great alternative, and for most people, you're probably not going to need a better camera than this. And then here's some pictures taken with the BLU F91 5G. Now these photos are also really good, and kind of like with the A34 5G, I feel like for the average user doing more casual photography and stuff like that, you're probably not really going to need much better than this. I feel like with the BLU F91 5G, things are a little bit more oversaturated compared to the A34 5G that feels a little bit more natural and realistic. But at the end of the day, if you take a picture with the BLU F91 5G and put it on Instagram, for example, it'll fit right in and people aren't going to look at it and instantly assume it was taken with a budget phone. So both cameras will get the job done, but if you do want the better one between the two, overall, I do think the A34 5G will be a better choice. Now for the RAM and processor, with the A34 5G, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 1080 processor. With the BLU F91 5G, this phone is getting 8GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 810. Now between the two, on one hand, the BLU F91 5G is definitely not slow by any means. In fact, for most people, the performance is good enough for pretty much anything you might be doing. But that being said, the A34 5G is still significantly faster. So if you are going to be on your phone a bit more, doing more demanding activities, you definitely will notice this. But on the other hand, for more basic stuff like web browsing, light social media use, and maybe some mobile gaming every now and then, stuff like that, the BLU F91 5G will be perfectly fine. And while you still might notice the difference, it's not really going to be so much that it's really all that necessary. So if you are more of a light user, you might want to stick with the BLU F91 5G, but if you do want the best performance between the two, the A34 5G will have a significant advantage. Now I did run a benchmark test on each phone using Geekbench 6, and here are the results I got. So again, as you can see here, there is quite a difference, with the A34 5G being significantly faster. So again, if you are going to be on your phone a lot doing more demanding activities, like for example high performance mobile gaming or maybe video editing, something like that, although I just can't imagine doing video editing on a phone, but the point still remains, with the A34 5G, you will get a much better, nicer, smoother experience, whereas with the BLU F91 5G, for more of a heavy user, you're probably going to want something a bit faster. But again, with this phone for more basic activities, it is going to be perfectly fine. So if you're not really going to be on your phone all the time, while the A34 5G is clearly faster, the BLU F91 5G is still not a bad choice. Now for the battery, both phones have 5000 mAh batteries, with the Samsung Galaxy A34 5G supporting 25W fast charging and the BLU F91 5G supporting 18. In addition to this, the BLU F91 5G also does have wireless charging, whereas the A34 5G doesn't. So overall, the battery life is going to be pretty much the same. But that being said, both phones have really good batteries. I mean, with the 5000 mAh battery, that is one of the larger batteries you can get. So if battery life is important to you, you're not going to go wrong with either phone. And then when it comes to charging speed, sure, technically the fast charging with the A34 5G is a bit better, but with 18W fast charging, the charging speed with the BLU F91 5G is still plenty good enough, so I feel like it's not really a significant difference. But one actual difference here is that again, the BLU F91 5G does support wireless charging, whereas the A34 5G doesn't. So if you do want wireless charging, then you might want to go with the F91 5G. Now for the software, this is an area where the BLU F91 5G is at a pretty big disadvantage. On one hand, the A34 5G does have Android 13, it came with it, and with Samsung software support, it should also get Android 14, 15, 16, and 17, whereas with the BLU F91 5G, unfortunately this phone is still on Android 11, and with BLU software support, I don't imagine it even getting Android 12, let alone Android 13 or anything beyond that. Now, I've been wrong before, so I'm not saying it's impossible that this phone gets any updates, but considering this phone is at least a year old, if not older, I still seriously doubt it, and definitely compared to a Samsung, the software support's not going to be nearly as good. So if you care about having the latest version of Android, definitely go with the A34 5G, but at the same time, with the BLU F91 F91 5G, I haven't really had any performance issues because of it, so if you're not really that concerned about the software, I guess it's okay. But clearly here, in this area, the A34 5G definitely has a significant advantage. As far as other features go, both phones do have NFC, so if you're hoping to use tap and pay, you won't have to worry about that with either phone here. But another thing I do want to point out is that unfortunately the A34 5G does not have a headphone jack, so if you have a normal pair of wired headphones you want to use, with this phone, you will need an adapter. Whereas with the BLU F91 5G, luckily this phone does have a normal 3.5mm headphone jack, so you can use wired headphones with this phone just fine. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? In general, in pretty much every way, I would say the Samsung Galaxy A34 5G is the better device here. The processor is significantly faster. I do like the image quality quite a bit better. The Super AMOLED display does make a huge difference, and while the refresh rate isn't really the biggest thing in the world, it definitely is a nice premium touch the BLU F91 5G just doesn't have. Again, I do like the camera with the A34 5G a bit better too, and the software support is significantly better, and I feel like for most people, having the latest version of Android is definitely a nice thing, especially if you're going to be keeping your phone for a while. Because with the BLU F91 5G, it would be one thing if it had like Android 12 or even Android 13, but maybe wouldn't get any more updates after that. But I mean, Android 11 in 2023 is honestly pretty bad, so unless you really just don't care at all about the software, I feel like for some people, the software alone might be a deal breaker. But if it's not, the BLU F91 5G is still not a bad device. It does have really good performance, a pretty nice display, tons of storage, a pretty nice camera too that can take some pretty good pictures, a really large battery, and features like wireless charging and NFC. So again, if you don't really care about the software and you need something for more basic activities that has a decent amount of features, good performance, a nice display, and plenty of storage, the BLU F91 5G is still going to be an okay choice. But in general, if you really want to maximize the features and overall value you get for the money, I do think the A34 5G is a much better choice here. But this concludes my comparison between the Samsung Galaxy A34 5G and the BLU F91 5G. Again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description where I am linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.